Coming up this week on Sporting Journal Radio, we're talking elk in Minnesota.
We, of course, have concerns about translocating out animals across state lines that could potentially have chronic wasting disease.
Gosh darn it, maybe we can do something like that with elk in northeast Minnesota.
They had almost a 30-inch average for every single walleye.
I fish, I hunt, and always will. Broadcasting from the Eau Claire Outdoor Studios. Presented by OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. We're not just a radio show anymore. This is Sporting Journal Radio. That's right. Welcome to the show. I am Brett Amundson. Thank you for watching or listening to this wherever you're getting this show right now. That's Dan Amundson over there. Dan, what's up?
Hey, Sky.
Wow.
Get it?
Wow.
Get it? Hang on. Nope, wrong button.
That's David Eckhardt over there. David, what's happening?
Not much.
You don't have a clever comeback? Like,
No.
Dan's very...
Yeah, I'll let Dan take care of the corny jokes. You got it.
Well,
you're the one who grows the corn, though.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
Oh, my God.
Yes, I'm on fire
Can we start
today.
this over?
We're going to talk about corn with David just a little bit because he has some 12-foot corn. Is that good or bad? I don't know. Maybe he doesn't either.
That is really loud.
But we'll find out coming up a little bit. We're also going to talk about elk in Minnesota. More elk on the landscape is coming. We're going to find out when, where, what it means for you. We got a couple of biologists that are a big part of it. Mike Schrage and also Blane Kemek are going to be discussing the entire process from front to back and what it can mean for the future of big animals in Minnesota. Also, Joe Henry will have a Lake of the Woods fishing report for us in just a little bit. Dan, who are this week's sponsors?
This week we have Live Target Lures. Match the hatch at livetargetlures.com. Lake of the Woods Tourism. Lake of the Woods is the walleye capital of the world. Plan a trip for this summer. Maybe start thinking about winter at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. Haybell Heights Campground Resort on Devil's Lake. Book a trip to Devil's Lake. Learn more at haybellheights.com. Ottertail Lakes Country. Find your inner otter at ottertaillakescountry.com. And Prairie Sportsman, our new season is wrapped up, but check your TV guide for local air times for reruns, or go to our YouTube channel and check that out. And I want to mention that hunting season is right around the corner, so it's time to re-up those OnX subscriptions. And remember, they have CarPlay now. So if you're driving around and your car has CarPlay, you can use OnX on your screen, which is super, super cool. So you can just be driving around and look to your left, look to your right, and see who owns what and where's public land. So get that taken care of.
And don't forget, hunting season is right around the corner. Make sure you protect your hearing with new hearing protection products from Eau Claire Outdoors. Man, what is it? The flies have been just ridiculous lately. And it's not a lot in here, but there's one that just loves this general area right here today.
Is it you? Do you need to shower?
It might be me.
It might be that one that I swatted twice out of the air this morning.
Yeah, didn't you draw blood?
Die. Yeah, the thing just flew away. I don't know.
Was it your blood?
Well, it could be the flies struck back. I don't know. Anyways.
Man. All right, well, we got some new stuff coming to our Fish Hunt Forever channel on YouTube. Make sure you check out that one, as well as the one you're watching right now. We've got a new video. We filmed a video for Cast King that they could play at the booth at iCast. And there he is again. He's attacking me.
Right into your eye.
Gosh. He's coming right for us. We filmed a video of us filming the video. So it was kind of like what we went through to make this video for the Cast King booth at iCast. We had one day to film it. You can watch it now on the Fish Hunt Forever YouTube channel. And we got these new Fish Hunt Forever sun shirts and hats that are going to be coming to the Fish Hunt Forever store. And through the month of July, we're donating all proceeds, 15% of all proceeds, to Minfish, who is providing advocacy work for the future of fishing in Minnesota.
Is there an ice cream stain on that shirt?
I got it out.
Did you really?
Yeah.
You were all bent out of shape about that yesterday. Holy cow.
First day I wore it, and we stopped to get ice cream,
fails.
of course, because I was with Dan, so we had to stop and get ice cream.
Had to? Well, yeah, actually, we did have to.
He was driving, so we had to, but it was delicious. I had some ice cream, too. It was really good. I was trying to be so careful, because that's the problem with these light sun shirts. You want the lighter colored ones, because it's hot and sunny, but you don't want to get anything on them. And especially because we're filming in them and taking pictures, I want to keep them clean. And right, first day, brand new shirt, ice cream right down the front of it. in the car.
Adds character.
But I got it out. I'm pretty impressed with my...
Did you use Ecolab to do it?
Did I get it all out?
Maybe you didn't. Stand up.
Yeah.
Let the viewers decide.
I think I got it out because I think it was like right.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't see anything.
Different. I think
That's a new stage.
We don't want to know what that is.
But it was the ice cream. I think was right here maybe. I don't know. It's gone. Good enough for me, and it won't be the last stain I put in it. That's for sure. You will see many more, I'm sure, put in. But it's a fishing shirt, so who really cares? But these will be available soon in the Fish Hunt Forever store. We got some, wanted to try them out before we started selling them, and these hats too. We wanted to see how they look, and I've already been selling them. I think the first shipment's going to be gone before I can put it in the store, just from friends and neighbors. So we'll get more. We'll put them in the store. I got a request today to get a hot pink one.
Whoa.
Nice.
To put in the store. So
I'd rock that.
we'll try. I bet you will.
Don't you wear a pink shirt every once in a while, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bright pink.
It's
Yeah.
salmon.
No, it's hot pink.
Why do you have a pink shirt?
My wife says I can't even look at you. It's so bright.
Oh, she didn't get it for you?
Nope.
Well, you got a pink shirt on your own.
I got it from work.
Are you colorblind? Oh,
You're colorblind.
I am. Yeah. So I might be wearing pink, and I'd have no idea. Whatever. All right, so check it out. If you go to sportingjournalradio.com, click on store, you'll see we got a bunch of really cool stuff in the store, and we're donating it to a good cause. David, you recently went on a bit of a road trip.
I did.
Where'd you go?
Southern Minnesota, southern Wisconsin.
Well, hang on. When people
northern
ask you that
Wisconsin.
question, what was your answer? Where were you going?
We left Granite Falls, and the destination was Granite Falls.
You were on a motorcycle.
Yeah, we did a 1,000-mile loop.
Wow.
And
Were you walking funny for a couple of days afterwards?
my legs were sore the next day. Yeah, I felt like I ran a marathon.
What was the idea behind this?
It's called 1K in a day, so you got 24 hours to do 1,000 miles.
Oh, it's a thing. Like it's
yeah.
a challenge people do.
Yep. So we did it in 18 hours and 40 minutes.
Wow.
And
Is that
was
pretty
enough.
good? I don't know what it would normally take.
It's average. There's a lot faster ones, but not around here.
Okay.
Or
So
a
where
lot
did
faster times, I should
So
say.
you planned out then a 1,000-mile route, looked at a map, and said,
Yep.
"Let's do
Hopped
this."
on Google and made a route, and yeah, stuck to it, and it was a long day.
That's a 1,000 miles on a motorcycle without opening your mouth. It's without
Yeah.
smiling,
Yeah, pretty much. Just
cleaning
ride it
bugs out of
out.
your teeth. Because this time of year too, July, and going through Minnesota and Wisconsin, and if you go for 18 hours, you're going through that sunrise and that sunset time, and if you go near water at all, there's it sounds like it's raining when you're driving through with your truck.
yeah.
What
It
was-
was 50 degrees in the morning, so it was pretty cold when you're going 60.
60.
60.
Sure. I don't know if any law enforcement listens to this.
I feel like we
I
got
guarantee
robbed.
they do.
One of the guys on it, he's like, I feel like I got robbed of a sunrise because it was all that Canadian wildfire smoke at sunrise. So we didn't really. You could see the sun poking up through the smoke, but that was about it. So the sunset was nice. I don't know, and it got cold again that night, but yeah, I think we got back about 10:30.
So you didn't deal with bugs too much then? Because it was too
No,
cold.
I think it was
probably.
cold enough.
Sure. What about deer?
We saw a few. Nothing off in the distance. Nothing jumped out of the ditch at us while we were riding, so that's nice. But saw a few.
I mean, western Wisconsin, for sure, just because I got experience there in western Minnesota around that dusk time, especially this time of year, there's deer all over the roads.
Oh yeah, we all of them we saw were out in fields. A couple on the field edge at the ditch. But
You weren't in the fields with?
No.
Okay.
No,
You
kept it on the highway.
road? Okay. Good. What anything surprised you, or is there anything that stood out from the trip, or was it just all kind of a blur because you were driving so much?
Yeah, it gets to be kind of a blur. Nothing. Can't remember. There's a town in Wisconsin that had a giant deer statue with a giant rack. I'd have to look back on the route. It was just before it was east of Little Falls.
Little Falls.
Well, hang on.
in
now.
Little Falls, Minnesota, east of there.
Oh, are you talking about in Minnesota?
No, it was in Wisconsin before we crossed into Minnesota. I was like,
So
oh,
east of Little Falls is like
That could
by
be a
St.
lot of
Cloud.
that's central Minnesota.
yeah.
Talking about St. Croix Falls?
Are you talking about Deerwood, Minnesota?
Or maybe it was Minnesota. I don't know.
Here,
was
hang
like
on. Let me pull
a
up the
2
picture.
foot. Oh yeah, there's the deer.
Yeah, that's Deerwood. That's
Yeah.
Minnesota.
Minnesota. I don't know. There was like a tiny sign crossing back into Minnesota, so I don't know exactly where we were, but I was like, oh,
Well, that's
man, that would have been cool
Deerwood.
to stop and take a picture with.
They put an orange. Yeah, you see, they put an orange vest on that during gun
Yeah.
season.
But I'd never seen that before. That stuck out to me because I'm getting excited for deer season. So
Oh, yeah, for sure. All right, so would you do it again?
this is the second one I've done,
No.
and yeah, I'd do it again. The last one was 5 years ago, so
Well, we got an 18-hour drive in front of us, but we're going to be on 4 wheels with air conditioning.
Yeah.
But we're going to Tasman Lake Lodge. We can't fit all of our camera gear and 2 dogs on a motorcycle.
Well, have we tried?
We could try.
Be kind of
try.
fun, actually. I don't know.
you'd have to have a trailer.
We're not going
but-
to get very far.
You got one we can borrow? You want to go?
Yeah.
Nope.
You want to? Oh, okay. Never mind.
So over the next couple of weeks, you'll be hearing us talk about Tasman Lake Lodge quite a bit here on this show, and we'll be sharing some pictures and videos. Of course, we'll be filming Tasman TV. There's another YouTube channel for you to check out, Tasman Lake Lodge, on there to see what it is that we're going to be doing while we're up there. How do we got to take a break, or how are we doing, Dan?
Well, we definitely could, but we definitely also don't have to.
All right, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we take a break? We're going to talk food plots and find out where David's food plots are at right now, what his next plan is for his food plots. So if you're planting food plots, he might give you some advice on what you can do. When we come back on Sporting Journal Radio.
852 million acres of public land, 147 million private properties, all in the palm of your hand. The #1 hunting GPS app just got better. With hundreds of custom map layers, 3D and topographic maps, you can easily scout on the road or at home before you go. And now you can get important weather details, CWD detection, and even know what crops have been planted where. Get the most trusted hunting GPS app ever made. OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. Kodiak, a North American waterfowl film, is coming to the Fish Hunt Forever YouTube channel.
I've been a sea duck hunter for about 30 seconds, and I've already got one that's probably going to go on the wall, so this is the coolest duck hunt I've ever been on.
Presented by Boss Shot Shells, with support from Sitka and Beretta, and additional support from Eau Claire Outdoors, High Prairie Animal Arts, and the Association of Great Lakes Outdoor Riders. Watch Kodiak on the Fish Hunt Forever YouTube channel. We're back, Sporting Journal Radio. Thanks for tuning in wherever you're tuning in. I'm Brett Amundson, along with Dan Amundson and David Eckhardt. And it is that time of year. We're getting excited about hunting season. One of the best parts is checking trail cameras, planting food plots, and just gearing up for the season, getting your gear out of storage. David, are you starting to see a bunch of deer on camera?
I only have one camera out right now, but
Are you crazy?
I'll be getting them out next week.
How many do you own, David?
I think 20.
What? 20. He has one out.
Well, I had to take them in because some of them have been in the woods for a couple of years, so I needed to clean the battery corrosion out of the battery cases and clean the lenses and clean the bird poop off of them. And yeah, they needed some TLC.
All right. So you're getting a few deer on camera?
That one camera that I still have running has, been getting a few pictures. Nothing too big yet.
And that's on one of your food plots, I'd assume?
It will be a green plot. Yeah, it's just dirt right now. But
Okay. And so what are you going to plant there?
it'll be a turnip, radish, clover mix.
And you're getting ready to plant that already.
Yeah, I'm going to do them earlier this year, I think.
Why is that?
Well, last year was kind of dry, and I did them in mid-August, and I just wished they would have been a little bit bigger, a little more green to them. They were pretty short. So I'm hoping for rain and planting earlier this year that they'll get a little bit bigger and have a little more food to sustain the deer through late season. So
Well, I feel like we're definitely getting more rain than last year. Not that we're getting a ton of rain this year. But
yeah. So I don't know. Most of my food plots, the corn and beans in them, look pretty good.
Now, is your food plot corn as big as your the crops you're growing?
One food plot is. The
Is it?
corn's 12 feet tall in it.
12 feet tall. That seems insane to me.
Yeah, I
That-
walked in there yesterday and I couldn't believe it.
The corn around here is pretty tall too. I walked through it and it was definitely towering over my head. But to think about corn being 12 feet tall, I mean, how often do you see that?
Not real often, but that's in like a perfect spot. It's in an abandoned grove, so it's got trees. It's protected from the wind. It gets good sunlight. It's been getting good rain. So there's 2-3 ears of corn on that, or 2 or 3 cobs of corn on each stalk. So
Are they there? And how's the growth on those cobs right now?
They were surprisingly pretty big.
Oh, really?
Already, yeah.
So
For sure.
is that kind of doubles your production then, I suppose,
Yeah.
when you're that. So you want corn to grow that tall.
Right, yeah. If it's got enough nutrients to grow that tall, it's gonna grow some pretty big corn.
Now you were talking about having some sort of plan to determine how much deer and raccoons or whatever are eating your food plots, right?
Yeah, so I'm gonna do a growth ring, which is just basically a wire ring, 6 foot tall, that you put in with a fence post, just to see how tall the stuff is getting without the deer being able to eat it. Because I've had food plots in the past where I think, oh man, this isn't growing very good, but it'll be nice to see what it's actually growing to versus what the deer are eating it off to. So I'm going to try a few of those this year, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny how much damage they can do, and you don't always know. Like, it's
Right.
hard to notice sometimes.
So yeah, it'll be a interesting project to see how much it gets grazed down.
How much sweet corn do you do?
I have maybe 8 rows, 100 yards long. It's not a lot, but the deer have already been attacking that in my yard.
Is that literally all it's for? Is just for a food plot, or do you
No.
gonna pick some and eat some?
No,
or-
I'm growing it to eat and freeze. And
Okay.
last year when I planted it, I think we got one or 2 meals out of it. The raccoons and the deer ate more of it than I did.
You gonna have a little stand in Granite Falls, or David's gonna be sitting on the tailgate of his pickup
Yeah.
selling sweet corn?
No.
No produce stand.
No, I don't think we're going to produce enough sweet corn to sell.
So I've always had this idea of like doing a food plot of sweet corn. Like, is it hard to grow? And the idea would be to grow it, to plant a big enough plot that it'd be a good early season food plot for deer, but then harvest it and then use it as a place to shoot geese early season as well.
I mean, it's definitely doable. It's a lot of work. You'd have to fence the whole thing off to keep deer and raccoons out of it.
All right, I'm out. That sounds like too much work already. I'll just plant a wheat field.
How have your other gardens gone?
Oh, terrible. The corn was the only thing I could grow. And that I was surprised at that.
At least the sweet corn's Roundup ready. You can just spray the weeds. You don't have to worry about
Oh, really?
hand
okay.
weeding it.
Okay, yeah, I did not do any part of that. There was no hand weeding it. Our garden was terrible. All right, well, keep us updated. You, how often do you spray your food plots?
So I sprayed them all at the end of May when I planted corn and beans, and I sprayed them all again now this last week.
And is all that stuff are you using Roundup, or do you have?
Yep.
Okay.
Roundup.
So that stuff's all Roundup ready?
Yeah, it's
So you
just
don't have to
leftover
be-
seed from.
You're just spraying the whole thing then as you
Yeah.
go. Okay.
And then the plots that I'm going to put turnips and stuff in, I just sprayed them all to keep the weeds down. Otherwise, it'd be 6 foot tall of weeds, and I'd have to go mow it. And that's just an extra trip. So
So say here at the end of July you're going to plant turnips. When do you start to see the benefit of that? I see the leaves probably start coming up pretty quick. They start sprouting.
depending on rain.
When do you start to see growth in?
It's usually within 2 weeks.
Oh.
It'll start to green up pretty quick. So
But that's meant for something a little bit later in the season for them to come feed on, right?
I've done them in the spring before, and it seems like they get too big.
Okay.
I don't know if they get like the stems get hard, and I don't know. It seems like the deer like them when they're little, and they don't put on much of a bulb. The one I did early they hit it in the spring, but then when hunting season came, they weren't really touching it, and then winter came, and they still weren't hitting it until like January 2nd, like 2 days after the season ended. Then there was 100 deer in there digging up the bulbs, but
Of course.
so I like the fall planting better.
Okay. Well, we're going to keep talking big game on the show. In fact, we're going to talk more elk opportunities in Minnesota with Mike Schrage and Blane Kemek coming up in just a little bit, and we'll discuss where we're at with the relocation in northeastern Minnesota. Also, a couple quick things. The ruffed grouse drum counts came out here recently. They were 1.5 drums per stop. It was down from almost 3 last year. But it's still a pretty good number overall, and it doesn't always equate to fall success. The statewide number also includes surveys in the central hardwood forests, areas in southeastern hardwood forests where less grouse habitat exists. Also, if you got a bear license, you have to purchase if you won in the lottery, you have to buy your license by August 1st, and then by August 4th, any surplus licenses that are available will be available. So there's a couple of deadlines for you for licensing in Minnesota in any way. Also, we're going to have more talk on that potential mushroom bag limits coming up next week on the show. We'll have a couple mushroom experts. If you haven't heard about that, you can watch some videos on our YouTube channel and social media channels about it right now. Otherwise, tune in next week to Sporting Journal Radio to find out more. Right now, we're going to check in with Joe Henry from Lake of the Woods Tourism for a fishing report.
Northern Minnesota's Walleye Factory is a year-round world-class fishing destination. The perfect getaway this summer is just a short drive to Lake of the Woods. Fish Big Traverse Bay, the Rainy River, or visit the unique Northwest Angle. To catch big fish, you have to go where the big fish are. Plan your trip to Lake of the Woods at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. That's lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
Okay, Joe, you're back from ICAST, and man, I've got a couple of buddies that are up at Lake of the Woods this week, and it sounds like fishing is, it's that time of year when fishing gets tough for walleyes in a lot of places, but not at Lake of the Woods. It seems like it just keeps getting better and better.
Tell you what, you are spot on, and you know what? If you don't believe me because you think I'm telling you a tainted story, just turn on social media for any angle that fishes Lake of the Woods, and you'll find out for yourself. You know what? Summer is awesome on Lake of the Woods. It's a very consistent bite. Right now, those fish are over deep mud, and my goodness, are we catching big fish. We are catching a lot of monster walleyes. 28 to 32-inch walleyes are coming in every single day. And, it doesn't sound like much. We talk about a 28 to 32-inch walleye. There's people that fish their whole life and don't catch a fish that big, especially when you talk about the dirty 30.
Dan.
Okay, calm down. We get it. You caught one 30-incher in your life, Brett.
2.
Oh, sorry. Oh, my bad. Calm down.
Get it right. Don't you forget it.
Take a break here.
2 more than you.
Hey, can you tell that story about the one you caught on your live scope again? I don't think I've ever heard that story.
Yeah, so we were trolling. No.
S&P, the choice for me.
I don't know why I hit that button.
Stan's first day. Big fish up there right now, Joe. And there was a tournament recently, right, that had a pretty big bag?
Yeah, one of the sporting goods stores up in the Warroad area is actually the Woods Goods, and they have an annual walleye tournament each year on Lake of the Woods. And I tell you what, you want to talk about a winning bag of fish. Now, they use that Fish Donkey app for their scoring where you measure the fish and then it converts it to pounds. But I'll tell you what, they had, I think, a five fish limit was the bag limit, I believe. They had almost a 30-inch average for every single walleye. I think 3 of the walleyes were 30 inches, and the other 2 were, I think they had a 29 and something and a 28 something. But, unreal. I mean, you want to talk about some big fish.
That's nuts.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. So who was it? That was Will? Is that Will? That's Will right there.
Yep,
yeah.
Will
Okay.
Poppenfuss and Aaron Schmitz took home that winning bag. Nearly a 30-inch average. It's quite a day.
Unreal.
And congrats, guys. I mean, you know what? Some people, I'll tell you what, regardless of how they're catching them and what technology they had and whatever else, everybody else has that same opportunity. And kudos to those guys for going out and finding some big-headed walleyes and making them bite. And, that's the name of the game. And it just goes to show those big fish are out there. And I'll tell you what, you should see the number of big walleyes coming off our charter boats right now. I mean,
Joe, hang on a second, Joe. Before you get into that, Dan, put their sponsors back up on the list because I think I figured out their secret to catching those big fish.
1 second.
Sponsors can really help you fish, especially if they got some great gear that you're using. And I'm looking through their list, and I see that they're sponsored by Papa Murphy's Pizza, and that's clearly what put them over the top in this tournament.
What else do we got? Half Brothers Brewing Company.
Beer and pizza.
There it is.
That's the new sponsors of Sporting Journal Radio, by the way. Papa Murphy's and Half Brothers Brewing Company.
Thinking out of the box, baby. You don't want to do what everybody else is doing. It gets watered down. Go get a new sponsor and bring them into the fishing industry.
That's right. That's right. So, I mean, there a lot of ways, a few different ways to catch fish this time of the year up there, Joe.
Yeah, and really, there are three different ways people are primarily catching. There's a lot of ways people are catching walleyes, of course, but really the most popular ways. A lot of those fish are setting up out in that deep mud, out in the deep basin of Big Traverse Bay, and consequently, pulling crankbaits and pulling spinners, drift and spinners, are two very popular ways. Yet there's still some people jigging. If you're on structure, you get a good school of fish under you. If you're sharp shooting them, people are doing everything from pitching jigging wraps to them to however they do them if they're sharp shooting, which means using your forward-facing sonar. But overall, as a rule, pulling crankbaits and pulling spinners with a crawler are the two most popular ways. Here's the deal. When you're out on that big basin, there is a lot of water. There is miles and miles and miles of mud out there. That mud is like a big aquarium. There is bait. There's different kind of hatches going on. There are random schools of walleyes in many different places. However, there's so much water. There's a lot of water. There aren't schools of walleyes. So it really helps to get out there and then just be flexible. I say be flexible. Use your electronics. See where the other boats are. Are other boats scooping in a certain area? There's so much water out there. You don't have to get real close to them. But the point of it is, watch your electronics. Is there bait? Are there hooks or indications of walleyes? Where are the walleyes? Are they on the bottom? Are they up a little bit? And then when you find signs of life, that's when you start fishing them. If you're pulling crankbaits, right now the average speed is anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 miles per hour. You might think 3.5, holy smokes, that's moving. It's moving pretty quick, but you're looking to get that reaction bite. What kind of crankbaits are they using? You know what? They're using shad wraps. They're using wally divers. They're using, we can go on and on with the different kind of cranks. Some cranks have a tight wobble. Some have a real wide wobble. Some are a minnow style where they're long and skinny. Some are the shad style. Mix it up, especially if you're fishing with somebody else. And you can use 2 lines or more, if maybe 3 or 4 people in the boat. Mix it up. Try the different wobbles. Try the different colors. Put that bait right in front of their nose. Have it hit the bottom a little bit. Raise that sucker up about 3 feet above their head. Sometimes fish, they're used to feeding up. If they don't feed up, they don't feed because it's not instinctive. Try some different things. When you're trolling, Brett, don't just go at the same speed and just go. Speed it up, slow it down, make a right turn, make a left turn.
Catch them on the turns. Yeah.
The lures on the outside go faster and they rise, and the lures on the inside slow down. That's a lot of times when you get whacked, How do you get your lures down deep in front of fish? If you have downriggers on a boat, like a charter boat does, that's a really good way. But downriggers are expensive, and most people don't have them. You know what? Lead core line. How about using snap weights where you let 25 or 50 feet of line out and then you snap a 1 or 2 ounce weight on the line and then lower it down again? What about using a 4 ounce bottom bouncer and a 6 foot piece of mono or fluorocarbon with a shallow diving crankbait? You want to talk about an inexpensive way to be really effective in getting your lure down in 30 to 34 feet of water to catch these walleyes. Those are all really great ways. And then just go fishing, and most people are going to have a good stretch of luck. You're going to find some fish.
Well, Joe, I know we were going to try to get up there this week. We didn't make it up, but we got to be in Bemidji for the Aglow conference, and we're going to be fishing around Bemidji. I'm sure it's going to be great. But after the conference is over, Dan, should we
skip duck opener and go walleye fishing
in a couple of days at Lake of the Woods after the conference?
Let's go. Cast and Blast, Lake of the Woods, duck opener?
Yeah. We'll talk.
Well, I'll tell you, the duck hunting up there, you guys, if you haven't done it, you guys, honest to goodness, you know this from past Aglow conferences, there's some duck hunting spots up there that are off the radar screen. And it's not like that many people duck hunt anymore. And, the one thing about the water of Lake of the Woods with all the bays and the rivers and things like that water is public. So you don't have to get permission from a landowner or anything like that. And you can just go sit off in a back little bay. I'll never forget the duck hunting show I shot a number of years ago. We went on a 4 Mile Bay. We picked out a patch of reeds, put 2 groups of decoys out so the ducks would land in between them. We're shooting ducks all morning long. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. The ducks were still coming down. There was thousands staged up in the northwest angle, and the divers were breaking off in flocks of like 10 to 15 and coming down. And there was a big flock out in the middle of 4 Mile Bay, so most were attracted to them, but some would take a swing by and say hello before they went to the big flock, and we'd give them a nice welcome, let me tell you that.
Yeah, it's going to be that time of the year here pretty soon. We're excited about it. Joe, if people want to plan a trip to Lake of the Woods, what should they do?
Hey, check out our website, and that is lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
Live Target, the leader in Match the Hatch, is back with new lures that also match the action. Introducing the Live Craw. The Live Craw is irresistible to bass, walleye, and other freshwater species. FTech's winner, the Ultimate Frog, looks and acts just like a swimming frog. With an exposed ultra-point mustad hook and replaceable legs, the Ultimate Frog has 2 styles, 2 sizes, and 8 colors. And iCast and FTech's winner, the Live Shrimp, mimics a fleeing shrimp for saltwater anglers. Coming soon from Live Target.
Well, a lot has happened if you're into the outdoor world here in Minnesota and the surrounding states, of course, but a lot of money getting pumped into the outdoors, and you got to be excited about it because it means some help in areas that needed help, and also some help for some new projects that a lot of people have been getting excited about, including elk in northeastern Minnesota, and 2 guys that have been a part of this for a long, long time are joining us, and maybe the 2 most excited people in the state maybe about this. I don't know. We'll find out. But Mike Schrage, wildlife biologist for the Fond du Lac Band, and also Blane Kemek, the regional wildlife manager of the Northwest region from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, join us. Gentlemen, how you doing?
Great.
Doing well, thank you. Good
Is
morning.
that an accurate statement, or have you run into people that are more excited about this than you guys?
Well,
I would.
Go
ahead,
Mike.
Blaine.
They're so excited. They're talking over each other.
Minnesota nice. There you go. I've run into a lot of people that are pretty jazzed about this idea. Yeah, for sure.
And are you guys excited about it, Blaine, or is this just kind of another day at the office for you?
No, this is not another day. This has been, this is a dream, actually, a dream that a lot of us have had for a very long time, and that is to create excitement about elk in Minnesota, because it's a fact, and Mike will definitely attest to this, that there are people in Minnesota that don't even realize we have elk, and that we could potentially have elk in northeast Minnesota too. Is exciting for a lot of people, and as people get to know more and more about this project and get to know a little bit more about our Northwest herds, I think it's just going to compound, and it'll just create more excitement.
So how long is this idea, where did this idea come from, and how long has it been in the process, and did it involve like you guys meeting halfway between Grigla and Cloquet under a tall pine tree under the cover of darkness? You know, I mean, like how is this process? Where did it start, and how did we get here?
I was just looking back over some of these things before this podcast. I think that this elk idea of moving elk to northeast Minnesota originated with the Fond du Lac Band, and it probably has its earliest origins in about 2014. And in 2014 and 2015, I was telling people, based on what other states have done, this is probably going to be a 10-year process, and so we're right about on schedule now.
Oh wow.
But yeah, it's been percolating and moving forward. We had a lot of pre-work to do, which we did with University of Minnesota and the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, looking at habitat feasibility and public support for elk in this area. So we had to check some of those boxes and make sure we had enough support and enough suitable habitat elk for here. And we got those done in 2019, and then it took a while to put together a formal proposal to move elk, so that was released by the Fond du Lac Band in June of 2021. And it was nothing as dramatic as meeting Blane under a tree somewhere. In the age of internet, I could just send him an email. But the Fond du Lac Band has had a lot of conversations throughout this process with the Minnesota DNR, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and a lot of other interested parties through this whole journey.
Now, was there any idea for this? I mean, was the idea for this basically born out of the fact that a lot of people wanted to see the herd grow in the Northwest, but a lot of people up there didn't, and I'm not going to blame any farmers or ranchers for not wanting, crop depredation or knocking down fences and having issues. Obviously, they've been having some problems up there, and I get all that. But a lot of people were excited about those big animals and wanted to see more. Is that kind of where this idea came from?
As I remember it, it was a combination of reading about some of the efforts Wisconsin was going through at about that time to grow their elk herd, and then also looking across at fisheries, which at the time was and still is working to reestablish sturgeon in the St. Louis River. There it flows into Lake Superior, and it's like, gosh darn it, maybe we can do something like that with elk in Northeast Minnesota.
Sure. Well, I want to talk about that reintroduction a little bit in Wisconsin and what you might have learned from that, those efforts, what worked, and maybe if there's anything that maybe you do a little bit differently. I want to ask you a little bit about that. But Blane, let's just talk about the Northwest elk herd just a little bit. That I think that goes back about 100 years, right? Original reintroduction efforts up there, and it's had its ups and downs, but overall, it's been where it's at now. It's kind of been in place for a little while now, right?
It has, yeah. You bet, Brett. Elk in Minnesota. Who knows for sure, but there's probably always been elk, especially up in the Northwest. But yes, the history of it goes back over 100 years. When at one point in time, a certain number of elk were translocated from Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and oddly enough, from an actual elk farm in Ramsey County, where a herd was attempted to be established in Itasca State Park. And there's a timeline right there for the viewers. Basically, from then on, elk had been translocated from the Itasca State Park up in the far Northwest, and eventually the animals that were at Itasca is really the source herd for that Grigla population today. In far Northwest, Kitson County, elk have probably trickled in from Manitoba, for example, and who knows, North and South Dakota both have elk. And if you look at today in Minnesota, we have on the DNR website a tool that our IT folks in the state, Minnesota DNR, developed to help us, to help actually the public help us find learning about elk distribution throughout the state through a reporting tool. And so staff as well, but people from all over the state can report their elk sightings and actually have an elk. There it is, elk sighting tool, and you can see all kinds of waypoints there, and you can clearly see that there are a lot of elk being reported by the public, just popping up everywhere. And a lot of times, what's these outside primary range, these animals are coming. Are typically, I should say, young bulls, probably looking for cows, or just, they're a wandering animal, they're nomadic. And so in any event, this is also was designed to create some excitement, some awareness of elk in the state of Minnesota. And one thing I wanted to add before I forget, when Mike was talking about, the genesis of the reintroduction of restoration of elk to northeast Minnesota. We have in the state 2 different citizen work groups that work with us to help DNR manage elk on the landscape. And these citizens groups, one is in Kitson County for those Kitson elk herds, and there's one in Grigla. And these are citizens comprised of producers, livestock producers, farmers, ranchers, as well as elk enthusiasts, hunters, various non-government organizations. Just a mishmash of folks that are interested in elk. And some of our elk work group members have actually brought it up to us as a group, this notion, this idea of translocating elk to places in the state of Minnesota, like other states do. Like, for example, Kentucky does this. Wisconsin did it, as Mike mentioned. But this idea of taking some animals from northwest Minnesota and putting, a handful of them into areas of the state that could support an elk population. Like right here where I live, the Bemidji area. This location in the state of Minnesota could harbor elk if they would show up. Plenty of public land. There isn't a whole lot of agriculture, especially row crop agriculture. There's interest in elk in this part of the state. So some of that had already been talked about by some of the elk work group members, kind of looking to the eastern United States and seeing what other states are doing. And why can't Minnesota get in on the act? And here we are, basically there. We're a couple years out, potentially, for translocating animals from the northwest part to the northeast part of the state. So all good and all exciting.
That's Blane Kemek and Mike Schrage. That's our guests right now talking about the elk reintroduction to Minnesota's Northeast. We got to take a quick break. Man, you could put them in my backyard, by the way. I just want to say that my neighbors who all farm would not like that, I'm sure, as much as I would. But you can put them right in the backyard. I'd be okay with that. We'll talk more about this process when we come back on Sporting Journal Radio.
Devil's Lake is legendary, and this summer has been legendary for walleyes. Don't miss out. Call Haybale Heights Campground and Resort today to book one of their modern cabins on East Bay. The cabins are furnished with a full bathroom, kitchen, and all the amenities like high-speed internet and are clean following CDC guidelines. Staying at Haybale Heights gives you full access to a private boat launch, fish cleaning station, and beach area. Learn more at haybaleheights.com. That's haybaleheights.com. Plan your trip to legendary Devil's Lake today.
Did you know there are more than 1,000 lakes in Otter Tail County?
Yep, and I'm gonna fish as many as I can. I'm an outdoorsy otter. Nothing beats a full day of fishing for me. The lakes of Otter Tail County give me plenty of options to lower my boat and snag the perfect catch. Not an outdoorsy otter? No problem. Otter Tail County has something for everyone. You just need to find your inner otter.
To find your inner otter, go to OttertailLakesCountry.com.
We're back. This is Sporting Journal Radio. Thanks for tuning in on this station on the network by demand or downloading the podcast at sportingjournalradio.com. Maybe you're watching this on YouTube. Thank you very much. We're talking elk in Minnesota. How many do we have? Where are they at? Where are they going to be? And when could you potentially be able to hunt them in a new place in Minnesota? We're going to answer all those questions for you now with our guests, Mike Schrage, wildlife biologist for the Fond du Lac Band, and also Blane Kemek, regional wildlife manager of the Northwest region with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. $2.3 million was recently appropriated by the Minnesota legislature for this process of putting elk in Northeast. And before the break there, we showed a sightings map of where elk have been sighted in Minnesota. And if you look at it, you're kind of surprised you see it there in the western part of the state, in the southwest. But Dan, look at the northeastern part of the state. There's a big area there that there hasn't been a lot of sightings, but that could potentially change. Mike, why don't you talk a little bit about this range where elk are potentially going to be relocated to?
Yeah, so the site we picked to try elk restoration, it lies about 20 miles west of Duluth, and includes most of the Fond du Lac Reservation, but then also surrounding areas between Cloquet, Floodwood, and Cromwell. Includes a lot of county-managed forest land, St. Louis and Carleton County, as well as state forest land on the Fond du Lac State Forest. There's also quite a bit of private land mixed into this as well. So all told, I think it's about a 292 square mile area.
Now, when I think about the Arrowhead region of Minnesota, that when it comes to Minnesota anyway, that feels like more typical elk country to me. When I learned about the elk up in the Northwest, and then and subsequent trips to the prairies of Canada, when I see an elk walking through a wheat field in Saskatchewan, it just, it's like I'm picturing them in the in the Badlands of the Dakotas or in the mountains of Colorado and Montana. It's weird to me to see elk in the prairie. How do you think elk will adapt to? I mean, I'd assume it wouldn't be too hard for them to adapt to the more forested region of the northeastern part of the state. And in that, maybe in the answer here, some people have said, why aren't we bringing back woodland caribou? They were up there in that part of the state. They're more suited maybe for that type of habitat. Explain how elk will adapt to that habitat, Mike.
Sure. So one of the beauties of elk is they are an extremely adaptable animal. In North America, elk live from Arkansas to Alaska and North Carolina to California, all kinds of habitats in between. In the upper Midwest, elk are a forested animal, and depend a lot on young aspen stands to provide forage, and so they're not so much a wilderness animal as maybe do better in managed forests. And we have quite a lot of active timber harvest in this area on the public and private lands. Aspen is a key species, so I think we are constantly creating those young aspen stands that elk will prefer.
Have you had to explain to people how beneficial timber management is, not just to the woods, but to wildlife that inhabit the woods?
Yeah, I think that's probably part of any forest wildlife manager's job is explaining, how timber management interacts with wildlife populations. And for many kinds of wildlife, it's beneficial. For others, depending on how much timber harvest and what you're cutting, it's less beneficial. But certainly for elk, aspen and young aspen stands that are generally created by timber harvest are going to be beneficial for them. That's the clear message we're getting from Michigan and Wisconsin is put a lot of young aspen on the landscape if you want to create good elk habitat.
And when people say, why not woodland caribou, what do you tell them?
In short, I think the time for caribou has passed. As much as I would like to see them come back, there was an effort made in the 1990s looking at restoring woodland caribou up into places like Cook County. There was some potential habitat considered in the boundary waters for that restoration effort. And then in 1999, all of that mature forest habitat that woodland caribou rely on, it all blew down in that 1999 windstorm. Created excellent moose habitat, but it's not caribou habitat anymore. Caribou are also painfully susceptible to brainworm, parasite carried by white-tailed deer, as are moose and other animals, but caribou seem really susceptible to it. And it's really hard to establish caribou populations when you have robust predator populations, both bears and wolves, which we do in northeast Minnesota. Maine tried to reestablish caribou in the 80s and 90s, I think, and that effort largely failed, and a lot of that was it did fail, and a lot of that was due to predation. So I just, I mean, as much as I would like to see caribou returned, I think the time for caribou has passed. And with climate change, I don't know that it's going to come back.
Well, this makes it for an easy transition to the next question then, because the number one thing you have to be hearing from people is, boy, this is, you know, we're just going to be feeding the wolves up there by putting elk over there. What you have to probably account for some predation. And obviously Wisconsin has some wolves. They don't have as many as Minnesota does, but obviously, and they've got a lot of black bears over there. So they've obviously had to deal with predation. Was it not as big of an impact as you thought it would be, or the biologists over there? Or what do you think the impact is going to be?
Yeah, so first I'd quibble with your first point. It's not the number one thing people ask me about. The number one thing people ask me about is, can you put those elk on my land? Followed by, how is this going to work with the wolves? And I would point out that Wisconsin, the forested areas of Wisconsin have just as many wolves as the forested areas of Minnesota, if you look at wolf densities on the landscape. And wolves in Wisconsin actually have more protection than they do in Minnesota. I don't know that people realize how many wolves are harvested every year over livestock depredations in Minnesota. In spite of abundant wolves and bears on the landscape in Wisconsin, and wolves are the leading cause of mortality for elk in Wisconsin, but in spite of that, Wisconsin is growing their both elk herds that they have, and both herds live in wolf range. And Wisconsin now in the northern herd is their fifth or sixth hunting season in a row now. And our elk in northwest Minnesota currently live in bear and wolf range, and yet we need to have a hunting season to keep those numbers within the herd numbers within prescribed limits. Sure. So I am confident that if we put enough animals on the landscape here in eastern Minnesota to jumpstart the herd, and we provide enough good habitat for them, that they will cope with predation. I mean, elk grew up living with wolf and grizzly bear and black bear predation. They'll be okay if we provide the cover and food and space that they need.
Oh, grizzly bears aren't that big of a deal. They don't.
Yeah, no, that's a second. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you nailed it. You bring enough. I mean, there's a lot of meat on an elk. You give them a couple of elk to feed on and have enough numbers to account for it.
I think it will not take our local wolves very long to realize that elk are delicious eating. But if we put enough elk on the landscape, they will be able to escape the predation pressures. If we only put 10 or 12 elk on the landscape, it's not going to be enough. We're going to have to do more than that.
Well, let's talk about that, Blane. Let's talk about numbers of elk up in the Northwest and why our elk have to come from there. As part of this process, as this idea has come along, efforts to combat chronic wasting disease have really stepped up. They've kind of changed the game when it comes to translocating animals, haven't they, Blane?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Chronic wasting disease has been a game changer all across North America, and in fact, it's even now across the ocean, across the Atlantic, chronic wasting disease. And we have been in Minnesota DNR, and our tribal partners as well, have been sampling hunter-harvested deer for chronic wasting disease for a very long time now, since I believe in Minnesota, since 2002, I think. In any event, translocating elk from other states, certainly we've talked about that with regard to the elk restoration project in northeast Minnesota, because, frankly, one of the go-to states these days to get elk has been Kentucky. and that would be a logical choice. But we, of course, have concerns about translocating animals across state lines that could potentially have chronic wasting disease. And then there is a live animal test that's being developed by the University of Minnesota, but it has not been approved yet. So, that will be down the road a game changer too, if we can test animals, live animals. But so we get to Minnesota. Where would we
Blane,
get elk?
I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 second.
Yeah.
We gotta stop with the radio show. We're out of time for the radio show, but we're going to continue this conversation on the podcast. So if you're listening to this on the radio, go to the Sporting Journal Radio YouTube channel or sportingjournalradio.com to hear the rest of our conversation with Blane Kemek and Mike Schrage as we discuss elk reintroduction in northeastern Minnesota.
I was just going to kind of conclude and wrap up there that the logical choice then, since animals that we're not really, it's not on the table at the moment to obtain animals from other states, elk, to translocate to northeast Minnesota. So we're looking at northwest Minnesota's elk population, and this fall we will be sampling hunter harvested deer in the northwest part of the state in elk range to determine, or to help us determine, the potential of the prevalence of chronic wasting disease within the wild deer population. And of course, we have elk hunts in northwest Minnesota too that will start in just a little over a month. And tribal hunters from Red Lake Nation will be hunting elk in northwest Minnesota, and we will be sampling all hunter harvested elk as well for chronic wasting disease and other diseases. So we're looking, of course, to ensure as best as we can disease-free animals exist in northwest Minnesota. And for the time being, that is the case. Elk, for a long time now, since we began hunting elk in northwest Minnesota, every single one of the hunter harvested elk have been sampled for CWD and a variety of other diseases. And CWD has never been detected in any hunter-harvested elk, or for that matter, any elk that we were a dead elk that we've been able to get our hands on, like a roadkill and these opportunistic sampling, our carcasses that we've been able to sample.
You brought up that Red Lake is going to be hunting these elk. This is the second year now that they're going to be taking part in that. Why haven't they been a part of it in the past? And they went, and I don't want to wade into some waters that maybe we don't want to get into, but their tag allotment went from 5 to 30 this year, and for other hunters it went from, I can't remember what the number was last year, down to 17. Explain what that process is like and how the allotment of tags goes.
Well, it's a difficult process, I will have to say, in that, DNR, state of Minnesota, is restricted, first off, Brett, with the numbers of tags that are doled out for the state hunting season, and it actually brought it up in a way with regard to the population goal ranges for these populations of elk that we have. Now, Grigla, for example, last fall we only sent, or I should say, surveyed 29 animals out of the Grigla population. The population goal range that was established working with the elk work group in Grigla and written in the strategic management plan for elk is 30 to 38 animals. So we are under goal. We're not going to hunt elk. We haven't hunted elk there since 2012 in Grigla, the Grigla population. But over in Kitson Central, which is the northwesternmost county in the state of Minnesota, where our other elk are, the Kitson Central group, just north of Carlstad, in that Lancaster community area, elks, the population goal range is 50 to 60. Well, last year we counted 70. This past winter we counted 75 elk there. So we're trying to work that population down within that 50 to 60 population goal range. And the caribou vita herd, sometimes called the international border herd, caribou is named after a town, not the animal. There's a community in Minnesota called Caribou, and then across the border in Manitoba is Vita. So caribou.
It's not
Vita
a very big
herd.
community.
In any event,
I've been up there.
Nope, you're exactly right there. But in any event, there's a fair number of animals there. We counted 96 on the Minnesota side this past fall, and we got permission this past winter. This past winter, we got permission to actually go into Canada, into Manitoba, into their survey block, our Manitoba Conservation Volunteers, and count elk up there too. We counted 131 animals on the Manitoba side for a total of 227 animals. So that herd, with respect to the Manitoba conservation folks up there, we have agreed to maintain the hunt on the Minnesota side, but in very small numbers. So we issuing 5 tags there and 12 tags in that Kitson Central herd. With that in mind, Brett, we also were fully aware that Red Lake Nation would have a hunt, and we tried to work together, and we do work together. It isn't that we try to work together; we do work together. But things got ahead, and their commission, the Red Lake Nation Commission, who oversees the 1863 ceded lands, treaty territory, and its hunting, fishing, and gathering rights there, decided to go from 5 to 30. Now, that was a surprise to us, at least that many more, but we fully expected that there would be a tribal hunt, and so that is why the state licenses that we are issuing this year was less than last year.
Okay.
Which is 17.
Okay. So they can essentially issue as many as they want to, as of right now.
That is a fact. And I'll say something else. We did have subsequent conversations, numerous conversations with our colleagues that work in Red Lake Department of Natural Resources there, and they in turn talking with the tribal council members and the commission itself. We proposed. DNR proposed that perhaps Red Lake Nation could consider capping harvest. Like, for example, if 15 or 20 whatever is killed, to stop the take. They are considering that, and it's possible that this coming fall, that if 15 or so animals are harvested, if that happens by tribal hunters, that perhaps that hunting season would cease.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the management goals up there, because those elk management goals have to be met in order to move elk from that herd over to the northeast, correct?
So Fond du Lac's proposal is that we will only move elk from northwest Minnesota when they exceed their management, when they exceed population goals that are set for those herds, whatever those population goals may be.
Okay, that makes sense. And for guys like me that dream of hunting elk someday in Minnesota, it's something to get excited for, right? Because and Blane, maybe you can help me out with this, because I remember hearing about an elk. I think it got caught in a fence up there and it ended up dying. But it would have been, the rumor was that it would have been like a world record sized elk. I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about. What's the story there, and what happened?
That is a real, that was a real trophy, I think. Well, shoot, it's either number 3 or number 5 non-typical elk that, for some inexplicable reason, this animal somehow tripped over a 3 or 4 strand barbed wire fence, and it actually landed on its back and skewered its rack into the soft earth, and it was immobilized by that. It didn't kill it, but a muzzleloader hunter happened upon it, and they actually worked on prying its giant rack out of, there it is, it's unbelievable, giant rack out of the soil, and it was able to get up on its feet, but it was just too far gone. It had been on its back for far too long, and there's a photo of what it looked like, when it was laying there. I mean, good grief, what a way to go. But that animal, yes, its genes still exist up there, and each fall, state hunters, and now perhaps tribal hunters too, routinely kill, maybe not animals quite like that one, but big trophy class elk in northwest Minnesota. So the genetics are most definitely there.
Well, those are the ones you can move to my backyard. The ones with those genes.
Maybe mine too.
Man, wow. Well, so speaking of the hunting season, is that for state hunters? Is that technically a once in a lifetime tag, or how, like how many people apply for an elk license in Minnesota? What are the actual odds of drawing one?
Yeah, well, I don't know what the odds are. I know that yours truly continues to play the lottery, and and I have yet to be drawn. But I've known of people that have put in for the very first time in their lives and have drawn a tag.
Oh wow!
So it's just the luck of the draw. But 2,000 to 3,000 people, I believe, routinely apply for these once in a lifetime hunts, as you put it there, and that is the case today. Yet is that it's a once in a lifetime hunt, and success. To tell you the truth, success rates are fairly high. I think it averages something around 30%, which I'd take that in Colorado any day. But that isn't the case where I hunt. But yeah, the main thing, Brett, for any hunter that does get lucky enough to draw a tag, is that given where these animals are, and a lot of them do live on private land, it's that knocking on private landowners' doors to get permission. Sure, there's 100,000 acres of public land in northwest, Kittson County, where these elk are. Mostly where they are in Kittson County, some in Marshall as well, but lots of public land, but they're not always going to be on public land, so the importance of knocking on doors and getting that permission.
Have landowners been pretty willing to let hunters chase elk around on their property?
They really have. I tell you what, those landowners up there are for sure our partners, and they will pull out all stops, helping those that they give permission to hunt elk on their property. They'll pull out all stops to help that hunter. I've known of some private landowners that's been out there helping skin and quarter elk with the hunter. Now, I wouldn't say that that's necessarily a service that they provide, but there are some people that do get into it and want to, make sure that the hunters that are on their land are, can be as successful as they can possibly be.
Well, maybe they'll get a couple of steaks.
All good folks there.
They might get a couple of steaks out of the deal. It's worth it. Maybe a case of beer.
Yeah.
So, Dan and I applied this year, and I'll tell you what, man, it was hard to decide because there's some bull elk tags available and then some cow elk tags. And honestly, it was hard because, it's a chance for a once in a lifetime trophy bull, but at the same time, it's like I'd be okay. I'd be okay with shooting a cow elk for the amount of meat that you get off of one of those animals. And it's good. It's good quality protein, and it's a lot of it. So it was kind of a tough decision. Well, let's see. Are our odds better one way or the other? And do we truly just want to shoot a trophy and take the meat, obviously, from that big animal, or do we just care about the meat? So it was a tough choice for us on this one. But
Did you get a license?
No, I don't think. Did they? Has it been announced?
Okay. Well, I do know that there are people that have already received their letters, their congratulatory letters.
Does it come in the mail or email? I'll be right back.
Yeah. They're in the mail. They should be in the mail. They have the old saying, it's in the mail. So yeah, I've been checking my box too, but
it would be great.
Yeah. So
I drew 100 prairie chickens a couple of times now, and the first time I applied, I got a tag for prairie chicken hunt the first time. So I probably used up my luck in the lottery on that one, but fingers crossed. I'll apply for elk now every year. And Mike, when it comes to let's talk about our timeline now. We've got the money for it. The idea is to start maybe moving elk by 2026. Is that right?
Yeah, so we have a lot of the money for it. I don't think we projected about $7 million to fully implement this effort. So we have some additional fundraising that needs to happen. But yeah, our goal is to move the first elk February of 26.
Okay, and then let's just talk dream scenario. Everything goes perfect. Elk are moving. The wolves are like, whoa. You guys are cool. You guys are new here. You're good. We'll come back in a few years and maybe just point out the elk that are being jerks to everybody else. I don't know. Just say everything goes well. When do you think? I think Wisconsin, it took 23 years for their first managed hunt. When do you? When do you think a hunting season could take place in the Northeast?
So I think realistically, what I tell people is, if we pull this off, I'm in my mid 50s. I tell people like myself and older should not ever expect to draw an elk tag in Northeast Minnesota. This is something we're doing for our kids and our grandkids, because it will take time to grow an elk herd to a level where it could support a sustainable harvest. And I hope to see that time, but I don't know that I'll still be able to get out in the woods and climb up in a deer stand or push a woodlot for an elk. So I think this is something we're doing for the generations coming up.
All right. Well, let's talk about just a few more steps that need to take place. Now, part of the money that was raised, I think it wasn't part of our the appropriation from the Minnesota legislature, but there was money to hire a biologist. Is that right?
Yeah, so the Fond du Lac separately, the Fond du Lac Band applied for some federal funding that's available through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and that the bulk of that funding is to support a position to basically a full-time position to implement this project, to do the planning and the habitat work, develop the capture protocols, the disease surveillance, everything else that needs to happen to make this a reality.
Okay, and where are we at in the process, or how soon do you hope to have somebody hired for that?
Well, I was writing the job description yesterday. I hope to bring somebody on later this year.
Okay. All right. So 3 years of research and projects and preparation, and then hopefully the first translocation in 2026. And then what happens? Because this money that was appropriated, that's only available for 3 years, right? So part of the project for the next 3 years is finding ways for additional funding. What do you think where do you think that funding is going to come from?
I think there's a variety of potential sources. This same Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, that's a well-supported bipartisan program. And so I think we could probably go back to that well in 3 or 4 years for some additional funding. Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation has been a huge supporter of similar efforts around the eastern United States, and I think we could look to RMEF to help support this. In Minnesota, we have initiatives such as the Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Fund that could help with a lot of the habitat work, as well as the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, which has already supported a lot of the pre-work that we've done for elk. And I think we could look to them in the future for some additional funding to help this process.
I'll tell you what, that ENTRF and LCCMR, I think, has been huge for the state when it comes to environmental projects and providing funding. That's a lot lottery money, essentially. So when you go buy those scratch-offs, if you went in to buy one of those Powerball tickets this week when it was $1 billion, I hope you bought some scratch-offs too, because that will help the environment in Minnesota. You might be helping put elk in the Northeast when you buy one of those. So is there...
Well, research too, Brett.
Lots of research.
There's been a lot of research. Yeah. In fact, the very first elk research, collaring project that ever occurred in Minnesota was funded by LCCMR, the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. And Eric Mitchell, DNR deer biologist, has just appeared here recently in front of LCCMR proposing another elk research project in northwest Minnesota to collar a lot of elk, bulls included. And anyway, it's very possible that will be funded through LCC.
What about, could we come up with a stamp, Minnesota elk stamp? Can people donate? I mean, what can the average guy like me that wants to see elk, potentially for a hunting season, for at whenever, or just to see more elk on the landscape, what can we do?
Well, one of the things that I would recommend anybody doing that wants to see more elk, that wants to see elk in more places, would be to contact your local lawmaker and voice that support. Elk in many places in the United States where they occur are, they are a boom to ecotourism. Mike has brought this up in some of his presentations, but it is a fact. A place like Pennsylvania, for example, has built some time ago an elk visitor center. I think around 500,000 people a year flock to that place to learn about elk. Think of the Ely International Wolf Center or the North American Bear Center over by Ely, and you can kind of imagine what an elk visitor center could be in Minnesota. And one of the neat things about where we hope to actually restore elk in northeast Minnesota is, it's in Cloquet, that Duluth Arrowhead country where, it's vacation land USA. What cool opportunities exist there for ecotourism to draw people into the area and see elk on the landscape, learn about elk. Not that it couldn't happen in northwest Minnesota, because to the credit of one particular individual, Roland Larder, who happens to be a member of the Kitson Elk Work Group, he, with his own time and dime, created a little elk information. As you drive into Lancaster, if you've ever been north of Carlstadt on Highway 59, you'll see a giant bronze bull elk statue with a big giant billboard about welcoming you to elk country. And, these are the kinds of things that you try to do to create awareness and excitement about elk.
Yeah. Well, there's no question that there's a lot of traffic up 35 up to the North Shore up there. That probably a little bit more traffic than up in the Northwest. But yeah, there is definitely a lot of potential. I mean, to me, there's a lot of potential for everything, and just the fact that there's just less ag over there just makes this this whole thing so much more appealing. So you're the Northwest regional wildlife manager. Who's the Northeast? Is there somebody that is going to be from the DNR, or are they going to move you over there, Blane?
Yeah, that. Well, I tell you what, what the folks over in the Northeast often would hear about elk is all the bad things about elk from the Northwest, but there is a lot of good to be told and good stories to tell about elk in Northwest Minnesota. And who my counterpart is in Northeast Minnesota is Lindsay Chartel, and the assistant Angela Ward. She's the assistant regional wildlife manager in Northeast out of Grand Rapids.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, we're excited about this. I really appreciate all the time today. And before we go, Blane, do we want to talk about how to take care of raccoons at all, or?
Boy, did I get some grief about that. I couldn't believe it. All I was doing was trying to take care of 4 raccoon kits until I could get them to Garrison Animal Hospital, to the animal rehabilitators there. But yeah, I enjoyed that. I had a couple of raccoons as a child, and I felt like a kid again holding a baby raccoon.
So we should provide a little backstory. You found them. They were just orphaned in the middle of a road, right?
In the middle of the dirt road, in the middle of the afternoon, on a hot, sunny afternoon on a Saturday, and inexplicably they were just there. I had no idea, no mother around. I kind of milled about the little things for a while just to see if a mother would show up. And well, anyway, I gathered them up and took care of them for a week until I could transport them down to the Garrison Animal Hospital, where they have a wildlife rehabilitation program called Wild and Free. And tell you what, if your listeners and viewers have never been to that place, they do a bang up job in rehabilitating eagles. I got on a tour, got to see otters, and they had all kinds of other, lots of different, they had a lot of raccoons, they had some bears, but all these animals, these wild animals, are rehabilitated and released in the wild. So the raccoons I took down there will eventually be back out in the wild, so that's a good thing.
That is a neat place there. Excuse me. When I lived in Brainerd, that was my vet. The Garrison place there was my vet. So I'd go over there, and they're like, "Oh, you gotta learn more about this place." We tried to do a story with the TV show, but because of because of their relationship with the state, we couldn't film it or something. I don't remember what the deal was, but it is a neat place there, and they do good work. And I'll tell you what, I think it's really neat that you did that, and that's probably cool that you had raccoons as a kid. But if they were in pheasant country, I'm not sure I would have had the same compassion for those animals that you did. So I'll give you credit, though.
Yeah. Skunks and raccoons are hard on ground nesting.
Yeah.
Chain through the prairie grasslands to kick up nesting waterfowl, and then we'd monitor those nests to understand nesting success and so forth. And yeah, there would be depredation on duck nests frequently enough by a whole variety of predators, but raccoons and skunks tended to be the number one predators. You can tell by the way they bite into the eggs what predator it is, and what they do with the nest. But there were others too, ground squirrels, badgers, and other, even fox, of course. But yeah, you're right, Brett. Raccoons are hard on ground nesting birds too.
Yeah. For sure. All right, guys. Well, I'll let you go. I know this has been a long interview. I really appreciate the time. Keep up the good work up there. I'm excited about it. And, man, keep us in the loop. We'll keep people updated on the process as it goes. And looking forward to seeing elk up in Minnesota's Northeast. Mike Schrage and Blane Kemek, thanks for the time today on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Sporting Journal Radio is a division of Macaba LLC. If you've got a question, comment, or story idea for us, send us an email. Go to sportingjournalradio.com. While you're there, you can learn how to advertise on the show and visit our store for hats, hoodies, coffee mugs, and more. Go to sportingjournalradio.com.